Most people think Omni-Man is just Superman with a mustache. He's not. He's a 2,000-year-old weapon of mass destruction designed from the cellular level to conquer galaxies. Today, we're breaking down exactly how powerful Omni-Man really is, every ability, every feat, every terrifying detail. Viltrumite physiology. Before we get into what Omni-Man can do, we need to talk about what he is. Omni-Man isn't powerful because of some radioactive spider bite or a magic ring. He's powerful because his entire species was built different from the ground up. Viltrumites evolved naturally on the planet Viltrum, then deliberately purged their own weak members in a brutal self-imposed culling to ensure only the strongest survived. Every cell in their body is extra dense, granting superhuman strength, speed, durability, regeneration, and enhanced senses, all from a single biological foundation. Here's where it gets real. The Viltrumites went through a civil war so brutal their population was cut in half. Then later on it was made dramatically worse after the Scourge virus left them with fewer than 50 survivors. That means every remaining Viltrumite is basically a walking extinction event, and Omni-Man is one of the strongest among them, and their genetics are absurdly dominant. Mark Grayson is half human and still inherited full Viltrumite powers. The genes are so overpowering that offspring are virtually pure Viltrumite in terms of power potential. Half-breeds aren't half as strong, they're nearly the real deal, which is, not ideal. And Viltrumites age incredibly slowly, living for thousands of years. Omni-Man looks like he's in his 40s. He's been alive for over 2,000 Earth years. That's not a superhero, that's a weapon with a mortgage, but raw biology only gets you so far. Let's talk about what that biology actually lets him do, starting with his strength. Superhuman strength. Omni-Man can casually lift hundreds of thousands of tons, and I need you to understand that word casually because it's doing a lot of heavy lifting here, much like Omni-Man himself. That's not his maximum. That's not him straining, that's him barely trying. His baseline strength, the effort equivalent of you picking up a grocery bag, is enough to move objects that would make industrial cranes file for early retirement. But the real showcase is the Guardians of the Globe fight. In issue 7 of the original comics, Omni-Man walks into a room with Earth's most powerful heroes and kills every single one of them single-handedly. He threw the Immortal through multiple city blocks like he was skipping a stone across a lake. He punched through reinforced alien spacecraft hulls. He survived Cecil's kinetic bombardment with nothing but a scratch for extended periods. Here's where it gets scary though. He was holding back. The strength he used against the Guardians was measured, controlled, deliberate brutality with the dial turned to maybe 6 out of 10. When he fights actual Viltrumite adversaries, beings on his level, that's when the full power comes out. His striking force at maximum is calibrated to level entire city blocks. The Guardians fight that traumatized an entire fan base was him being efficient, not desperate. Fans love comparing him to Superman, and honestly, it's a fun debate, but the comparison kind of misses the point. A Superman holds back because he's afraid of hurting people. Omni-Man holds back because you're not worth the effort. That's a fundamentally different kind of terrifying, and his strength is only part of the equation because the speed behind those punches makes everything exponentially worse. Speed and flight. Most powerful beings in fiction need some kind of wind-up, a transformation sequence, a running start, a dramatic pose. Omni-Man just goes 0 warm-up, 0 visible propulsion, 0 anything. 1 second he's standing on the ground, the next he's punching through the atmosphere at escape velocity. His biology literally allows him to fly through sheer willpower, which means flight isn't something he activates, it's something he is, and the feats back this up. He intercepts missiles and aircraft like they're standing still. Military jets might as well be parked. He crosses entire continents in minutes, carries passengers at supersonic speeds without turning them into jelly from the G-forces, and casually pops into space whenever the mood strikes. The man treats the sound barrier like a suggestion, but here's where it gets complicated. Omni-Man traveled from Earth to the Viltrumite homeworld, a distance implied to be light years away, in a matter of months, which either means he's capable of faster than light travel or he's just absurdly fast over sustained periods. The community genuinely cannot agree on this one, and honestly, the comics don't make it easy. The timelines are vague enough to support both interpretations. Like some fans run the math and get relativistic speeds, others get full FTL. Nobody gets a definitive answer. His combat speed is equally ridiculous. He reacts to attacks from other Viltrumites, beings who themselves move at speeds most characters in fiction couldn't even perceive, and does all of this while looking mildly inconvenienced, like swatting a fly at a barbecue. But being fast is one thing. The real question is whether you can actually hurt him when you catch him. And the answer to that is way more interesting than you'd expect. Durability. Here's where Omni-Man starts to feel less like a comic book character and more like a physics problem you'd find in a nightmare, because his durability isn't some magical force field or divine blessing, it's just density. His cells are so absurdly compressed that conventional force literally cannot reach the threshold needed to damage him. Let me put that in perspective. This man survived atmospheric re-entry without a scratch. That's temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, cooking every square inch of his body, and he treated it like a light breeze. He operates in the vacuum of space with zero protection. He functions at crushing depths and pressures that would turn a submarine into a soda can. No suit, no helmet, no nothing, just vibes and cellular density, standard Earth weaponry, completely useless. You could empty every round from every military base on the planet into this guy, and he'd be mildly annoyed at best. In the comics, he's tanked hits that leveled entire city blocks and walked away like someone flicked him on the forehead. That's basically the level of concern we're dealing with, but here's the thing. He's not invulnerable, and that distinction matters. During his fights with Mark, he tanked sustained hits from his own son, a half Viltrumite throwing everything he had and barely flinched. Mark couldn't meaningfully injure him until much later in their conflicts after significant growth. But beings of comparable or greater strength, other Viltrumites, they absolutely can hurt him. The threshold just happens to be astronomically high, and this is actually where the community debate gets interesting. Some fans argue durability is Omni-Man's weakest stat relative to other Viltrumites. Younger fighters like Mark close the durability gap faster than any other metric, which suggests that while Nolan is a tank, he's not the tank among his kind, which would be fine, except tanks don't usually need to recover from injuries, and Omni-Man definitely does. Healing factor. So Omni-Man can take hits that would turn a normal person into a memory. We've established that. But what happens after those hits land? Because here's the thing, he doesn't just walk it off. He actively heals from injuries that should be permanently fatal, and he does it fast. After his fight with the Guardians of the Globe, Omni-Man recovered from serious damage, deep tissue trauma, the kind of stuff where a human doctor would just close the file and call the family. And this isn't some passive Deadpool situation where his body mindlessly stitches itself back together. Viltrumite healing is tied to their biology on a fundamental level. Rest accelerates it. Their physiology is essentially running a repair program, not just hoping for the best. But here's where it gets interesting. Viltrumite healing is powerful, but it has limits. It can handle devastating internal injuries and broken bones, but there are thresholds. Enough sustained damage from someone on his level, and recovery becomes a real question mark. Which means every major fight Omni-Man walks into carries genuine consequences. The right opponent dealing enough punishment can push him past what his body can fix cleanly. That's a meaningful distinction from most regenerators in fiction, where injuries are basically temporary inconveniences. There's also the fact that Viltrumite healing seems to scale with their overall power. Omni-Man recovers more efficiently than Mark does in the early series, suggesting Viltrumite regeneration improves with age and maturity, another perk of being over 1,000 years old, I guess. The stronger the Viltrumite, the better the recovery. It's not a separate power, it's baked into the same biology that makes them nearly indestructible in the first place. But fast healing and sharp durability only get you so far if you can't detect threats coming. And Omni-Man's senses are far more terrifying than most people realize. This is the power nobody puts on a tier list. And honestly, that's exactly why it's dangerous. Omni-Man's raw strength gets all the attention, but his senses are the reason he's never walking into a fight blind. Let's start with hearing. The guy can pick up conversations from significant distances, not muffled noise, not general direction, actual words. Like he can stand in a crowded area and isolate specific sounds that most beings would lose in the noise. That alone would make him a terrifyingly effective hunter, and it's basically a footnote in his power set. His vision is sharp enough to track objects moving at extreme speeds and spot details across vast distances, meaning most attempts to hide from him are functionally pointless. Viltrumites in general have senses far beyond anything Earth-based, tuned for combat and survival across interstellar distances. So if you're thinking you have the element of surprise, you probably don't. He's already assessed you, which is, not ideal, but here's where it gets interesting. He navigates deep space without instruments, crossing enormous distances between star systems and arriving exactly where he intends. That either means his spatial awareness is absurdly advanced, or Viltrumite biology includes some form of cosmic navigation nobody fully understands. Either way, it's not something you can train for or replicate with technology. Now, the honest caveat: his senses are portrayed inconsistently. Sometimes he detects threats perfectly, other times he gets completely blindsided by things he absolutely should have sensed coming. Fans debate whether that's a genuine limitation or just the writers needing him to get hit for the plot to work. Probably both, but even divided attention from a Viltrumite is better than most beings' full concentration. Still, even with that inconsistency, his senses turn every other power into something sharper. And speaking of sharp, also all that sensory data means nothing without the experience to use it. Combat experience and skill. This is where Omni-Man stops being just another strong guy and becomes something genuinely terrifying. Because raw power is one thing, knowing exactly how to use it after thousands of years of active combat is something else entirely. Let that sit for a second. Omni-Man has been fighting longer than most human civilizations have existed. When the Roman Empire was just getting started, Nolan was already a seasoned killer with centuries of conquest under his belt. By the time we invented gunpowder, he'd probably forgotten more combat techniques than every martial artist on Earth has ever learned combined, and you can see it in how he fights. Omni-Man doesn't just hit harder than his opponents, he picks them apart. The Guardians of the Globe fight is the perfect example. 7 powered heroes, each one a serious threat on their own, and he dismantled them like he was solving a puzzle. He isolated targets, exploited openings, controlled the pace of the entire engagement. That wasn't a brawl, that was a surgical operation performed by a guy who's done this exact thing on countless different planets. Here's the thing that makes his experience so dangerous. It's not just about knowing how to throw a punch, it's about prediction. After centuries upon centuries of fighting every kind of opponent imaginable, Omni-Man can read a fight before it happens. He knows what you're going to do before you do it. He counters strategies before they're deployed. You're not fighting the guy in front of you. You're fighting every lesson he's learned from every battle he's ever won. Even when he trained Mark, you could see the gap. Mark had raw power and instinct. Omni-Man showed him how to actually fight, how to use his strength with purpose, how to think instead of just react. That's not something you pick up from a training montage, that's something forged over millennia of real warfare. And this is exactly why younger Viltrumites with comparable raw strength still struggle against veterans like him. Power without precision is just noise. Omni-Man is a scalpel wrapped in a nuclear warhead, but here's the scary part. He's still getting stronger because Viltrumites don't peak the way humans do. Power growth with age. Here's the part that should genuinely concern you. Everything we've talked about so far, every feat, every display of raw power, every planet-shaking punch, that's not his ceiling, that's his floor. Viltrumites don't hit their physical prime the way humans do. Most species peak somewhere in their 20s or 30s, and then it's all downhill from there. Viltrumites just keep going. Their strength, durability, and speed all continue scaling upward for centuries. The rate of progression slows down eventually, sure, but it never actually stops. They just keep getting stronger indefinitely. Omni-Man is thousands of years old, thousands, and he's still not at his theoretical peak. Let that sink in for a second. A being who can already punch through planets and fly at relativistic speeds is, technically speaking, still warming up. Age isn't just a number for Viltrumites, it's a quantifiable power multiplier. The longer they live, the harder they hit. the more damage they absorb. The faster they move, time itself is a weapon. And this is where Mark makes things interesting. Mark reached near parity with his father in a remarkably short span of time relative to how long Viltrumites live, a few decades versus millennia. That rate of early progression is staggering, and it raises a question the entire series is built around. Will Mark eventually surpass his father? Is this a story about a son replacing the old guard, or one about achieving parity and standing beside him? The comics play with this tension constantly, and there's no clean answer, but look at the oldest Viltrumites for context: Thrag. Every Viltrumite who's lived long enough to accumulate millennia of combat and growth is portrayed as dramatically more powerful than younger specimens. Age and power hierarchy are practically the same chart. Omni-Man is noted as one of the strongest of his kind, which means even among beings who've had centuries to grow, he's near the top. Now imagine what he looks like with another 1,000 years on the clock, which is not ideal for literally everyone else in the universe, but where does he actually sit right now compared to his own kind, how he ranks among Viltrumites? So after everything we've covered, the strength, the speed, the durability, the centuries of combat experience, where does Omni-Man actually sit among his own kind? The answer is both impressive and humbling. By any universal standard, Omni-Man is one of the most powerful beings alive. He can conquer entire civilizations single-handedly. He can fly through planets. He can fight for days without stopping. In the broader universe, he's a god. But among Viltrumites, he's not the god. He's looking up. Here's the thing. Omni-Man is consistently depicted as one of the absolute top-tier Viltrumites of his generation. Over 2,000 years of combat, conquest, and survival have placed him in an elite class that most of his species will never reach. Among active Viltrumites in the current timeline, he ranks somewhere in the top 5 to 10 depending on the story arc. That's out of fewer than 50 surviving members of the entire race. So we're talking about a very exclusive club, but there's a ceiling above him, and that ceiling has a name: Thrag. Thrag defeated Omni-Man in direct combat on multiple occasions. These weren't close fights that could have gone either way. They were decisive losses that made the hierarchy extremely clear. Thrag is stronger, faster, and more ruthless, and Omni-Man knows it. So that's the kind of knowledge that sits in the back of your mind every single day, which is, not ideal for your self-esteem. Now, his exact ranking beyond below Thrag gets genuinely murky, and the community has been arguing about it for years. Viltrumite hierarchy is largely based on strength and combat ability, and the most powerful members of the species are extraordinarily rare. Omni-Man is ancient by human standards, but not by Viltrumite ones. He's powerful enough to rule worlds, but not powerful enough to challenge the top of his own people. The best way to frame it is this. Omni-Man is a second-tier god. To every other species in the universe, he's an unstoppable force of nature. To the handful of Viltrumites above him, he's just another soldier. That's the tragedy of his position. Infinite power by everyone else's measurement, and it's still not enough. But knowing where he ranks is only half the picture, because even gods have cracks in the armor. So after everything we've covered, you might be thinking Omni-Man is basically untouchable. A planet-busting, civilization-ending force of nature with thousands of years of combat experience and power that keeps growing the older he gets, and you'd be wrong. Omni-Man can die. Thrag proved that in their final battle, though it took everything both of them had. That fight wasn't a clean victory for either side. It was a mutual destruction event that ended with both of them burning alive in the core of a sun. The guy whose sun is literally named Invincible is himself deeply vincible, which is, not ideal, but it's not just raw power that threatens him. Coordinated teamwork from multiple opponents of even moderate strength can overwhelm him. He doesn't have eyes in the back of his head. He can't block 6 attacks from 6 directions simultaneously. Strategy beats strength if there's enough of it, and the Guardians of the Globe fight proved that even when he wins against a team, he doesn't walk away clean. He nearly died killing them. Every single one of them got their hits in. Then there's the biological clock. Omni-Man needs food, he needs water. Extended space travel without resources is a death sentence, just a slow one. He's not some energy being sustaining himself on cosmic radiation. He's flesh and blood has an expiration date when you cut off the supply chain. Healing takes time too, and during that time, he's exposed. All in sustained combat against multiple powerful opponents grinds him down like sandpaper on stone. Enough damage, fast enough, and he simply cannot recover before the next hit lands. But here's the thing. None of that is his biggest weakness. His biggest weakness is that he cares. His emotional attachment to Earth, to Mark, to the life he built while pretending to be human, that has cost him more fights than any Viltrumite ever did. Every moment of hesitation, every pulled punch, every tactical failure born from internal conflict about whether he's a conqueror or a father, his humanity is functionally a liability to his Viltrumite nature, and he knows it, and he still can't turn it off. That's what makes Omni-Man a great character and not just a power fantasy. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.